apologies for the presentation. The glitch is there. I hope this presentation will become available on the website so that we can explore that more. Our previous speaker mentioned how can we shorten the time between research, innovation, and implementation. Well, I think part of the answer comes from Mr. Tarek Al-Hafari, that through concerted effort, motivation, and drive, you don't look for a couple of years, and a huge leap has been taken in innovation. Very relevant for today's session. Thank you for that. Well, that brings us to the end of our live panel contributions. What I would now like to do is to ask the organization to invite Mr. Wilfried Hundertmark. Mr. Wilfried Hundertmark, is he available and online?
Yes, he is available.
Is that you, Wilfried?
Yes, William, I'm here.
Okay, great, thanks. And thanks also for your patience. Very welcome. We would have loved to have you here, but this is the way we're going to have to manage it for now in this hybrid era. Dr. Hundertmark is a senior irrigation and drainage specialist with the World Bank presently. Extensive experience throughout this region. And a track record in a number of very reputed international organizations, IMI, FAO, IPTRID, in both the private and the international public sector. And Mr. Hundertmark will share some experience from the region in irrigation and water management innovation. Dr. Hundertmark, floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, William, for the introduction, and very warm welcome to all participants at this very interesting session so far. Now, I would like to take a little step back and to look at the advances in water management and irrigation technology, and look also at the context. And I would like to share with you two cases, one from Morocco and another case from Jordan, where the World Bank is supporting government in various fields in irrigation and water management. Let's first of all look at the general trends in irrigation technology adoption. If you look at the right side, I have depicted here the adoption rate of sprinkler and micro irrigation, and it is taken from an ICID database dated 2012. So it's a little bit old, but it shows, it makes the most important point. If you look at the spikes of the red line, it shows the adoption rate of mini sprinkler, of micro irrigation and sprinkler systems in the world. And you see the highest adoption rate you find in Israel. And that's not a surprise. We all know, we have seen this. But there are other countries which are equally performing in adopting irrigation and sprinkler systems, drip systems, but others are less high in their adoption rates. And the question is, why is that? What makes the difference here? You see, overall, micro and sprinkler irrigation accounts for 24.3%. Drip is still less than 5%. India has the largest area in drip systems, about 1.9 million hectares, followed by China and the United States. In the US, you see the adoption rate is about 60%. So there's a lot of surface irrigation happening in various states in California, but also in Nevada and other places. Overall, drip systems in Israel, and I mentioned this before, is at about 74%, and the rest is sprinkler irrigation. There is no surface irrigation. And the question is, why Why is that? And perhaps another example here that I'd like to highlight, and we saw this already in our presentation from Mr. Molero, who presented the Spanish case. There's a coming and going. So in South Africa, for instance, you see that gravity irrigation peaked in about the 60s, 70s, and then it gradually phased out. And what happened is that other micro systems, sprinkler systems, and eventually drip systems took over gradually and now have a very high percentage in the overall mix of technology. And interestingly, the future for drip systems and for these microsystems is very bright. According to Bloomberg, the market is about $9.4 million by 2027. So it's an enormous, globally, enormous potential for market development and for business. But the question, and I said it before, what are the determining factors for the adaptation of water management innovations? And we need to look at the environment the farmers are working in. They have their on-ground society realities, and their environment determines how they behave, how they uptake technology, modern systems. So they are exposed to a technology and a market risk, but they also are exposed to their internal environment, and it is important that the technology is compatible with the market and with the farming system. And of course, there's also always concern about the resource and the sustainability. Now, in the center, when it comes to technology, we have a number of knowledge agents, influencers, the new word. We have the private sector, we have universities, water service providers, water user organizations. The media play a very important role in all countries. And of course, the farmer-to-farmer experience exchange are important factors that influence the uptake of technology and modern systems. Now, what is important here is to understand that government has a very important role to play in arranging and organizing an enabling environment. First of all, it's to get policies right and to have an enabling policy framework for infrastructure development. We saw all these enormous efforts and achievements in Egypt already, focusing on canal rehabilitation and modernization of the canal network. And we have seen this also in Spain, in Spanish example. And of course, the institutional environment is important. We need a very strong and firm legal environment, and we need reassurance that investments are sustainable. And then those are the factors that we all find in those countries which have a very high adoption rate. Now, let's look at two cases. Number one is the case of Morocco. Morocco is, like in Spain, developing its irrigation and modernizing its irrigation sector very rapidly. And it has launched a large national program on water savings in irrigation. And the idea and the desire was to reduce the water consumption in irrigation, converting 555,000 hectares countrywide. This has not been fully accomplished, but they are more than halfway. 350,000 hectares have already been converted. And specifically in coastal areas, this has created a boom in irrigation and in development, which has led to a very severe overdraft of the groundwater resources. we notice and we observe there a drop down of irrigation and groundwater levels of 2.5 meters per year. This is enormous. And the consequence is that saline water comes in, pushes into these aquifers, and groundwater becomes saline. So that's a sustainability issue that requires the immediate attention in these areas. Institutionally, Morocco has introduced a system which is called the command and control system, which sets obstruction limits to groundwater users in combination with penalties in case of violation. However, this is not a very effective measure. There are many free riders. There's individualistic behavior. You have obstruction from the common groundwater resources which are not coordinated. Farmers are protesting, and you have insufficient enforcement capacity in the institutions, which pose a very serious barrier to actually reversing these trends in groundwater overdraft. The solutions and a new program and a project of the World Bank is currently underway is to reform the existing regulatory framework in Morocco towards a quota trading system, which is not like command and control. It's market-based, and it helps to be more flexible, and the farmers can make actually income from water rights that they have and they don't need. So there's a focus on groundwater governance, of monitoring, and of arranging and incentivizing farmers to reduce their obstruction. That's one case. The second case I would like to share with you is in Jordan. Jordan, as you know, is one of the most water scarce countries in the entire region, and the country produces 160 million cubic meters of treated wastewater a year. And on the right side, I have plotted over 30 central water treatment plants, wastewater treatment plants, which produce this enormous amount of water. But in agriculture, the current level of consumption or use is only 31 million cubic meters. So there is still a long way to go. And on the other hand, there is an enormous need to save fresh water and to substitute this fresh water by treated wastewater in order to supplement the supplies for the cities and for urban areas. And in addition, another problem where treated wastewater is needed is to also reduce a severe and serious overdraft of groundwater resources not in the Jordan Valley, but more in the highland areas. There is a fantastic and very modern policy framework in place in Jordan, a water substitution, a water reuse policy, a water reallocation policy. Many things are imposed. The institutions are well organized, but there's a standard for farmers to use treated wastewater. So many things are in place, but still we see a very slow and sluggish adoption of treated wastewater. And the reasons are manifold. Is the suitability to the cropping system. Farmers are not convinced that this is the right way to go. There's a food safety concern, especially as the agricultural sector is moving towards exportation. There's a serious salinity concern that the treated wastewater could affect the salinity tolerance of crops. And of course, social acceptance and regulatory fragmentation are prevailing in the country. So the solution here is to look at, again, reforms of the regulatory framework, providing incentives stronger incentives for treated wastewater uptake and use, preferential pricing, raising the cost of freshwater and irrigation, and of course a advocacy and media campaign and specific training. So a range of measures that would help to improve the uptake of these technologies. In conclusion, advances in water management and irrigation are typically based on technology innovation, both hard and software solution, which offer additional benefits to the customers, to farmers, and water management. But not all advances are equally successful, and their adoption varies greatly, and the impact are highly context sensitive to specific framework conditions prevailing in a country, which need to be addressed. And the cases from Morocco and Jordan and elsewhere in the region confirm that governments have a very critical role in shaping the enabling policy and institutional environment prior to promoting and upscaling of advanced technology, and to adjust the policies in case unintended impacts arise. And that's of course a very important point, to be able and to monitor the environmental situation so that you do not lose your resource entirely. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Dr. Hundertmark. I hope